Hello everyone. I constantly see things like this on film Twitter of things like Coraline or Lord of the Rings being re-released in theaters for their anniversaries, and I always just have to look at those tweets from the sidelines just thinking about how it would be to see Aragorn break his toe on the big screen because they never happen at theaters around me. Until now. So I was out of town and there was nothing to do really. I checked out what was playing in theaters and there was nothing good, except recently Interstellar had its 10-year anniversary and this theater actually had it playing. I had just seen the tweet a bit ago too and didn't pay any mind to it because I didn't think it would be playing. I watched this movie in like 2018 or something and haven't watched it since. Rewatching it was really good. You definitely get more out of it from watching again. Like the opening shot is the bookshelves and the dust. On your first viewing it doesn't mean anything to you, but Christopher Nolan plants the importance of this stuff immediately. There I am, in the theater. The theater is actually legitimately packed, by the way. I didn't expect there to actually be cinephiles, but there I was, in the dark. The trailers play, and then the shot immediately. This movie's so good, man. The world building is done so well too. I watched it and then didn't really interact with the movie more. I knew we were going to space, but I couldn't remember why. There's a crop plague going on, and all the plants are dying, and all this information is given really well. In the opening, we see all the dust, of course. You see how few people there are around, and the government and society care more about hard labor than they do about science. Matthew McConaughey's son, who's apparently Timothy Chalamet, totally forgot about that. He's good at school and his dad is thinking about colleges and the school is like, he'll be a good farmer. We need corn and potatoes. As someone who's freshly out of college realizing I could have gone and been a mechanic instead and make a lot more money, it's honestly quite vindicating seeing this theme. It was also surprising subject matter that was covered in 2014, a whole 5 years before the pandemic and society caring about essential workers. The characters and their motivations and growth and why they're like the way they are set up really well too. Mr. McConaughey was a pilot for an experimental aircraft, but it crashed and he stopped his work cause his world's dying. You can see the dynamic. Him and his dad live together, his dad cares about the farm. He still cares about the farm, but obviously still cares about science and raises his two kids as so. He teaches his daughter binary, but Timothy takes on after his grandfather. And his daughter, Murph, who would later grow up to Jessica Chastain, takes after her dad. Cooper, I can't keep calling him Matthew McConaughey, is eventually recruited by NASA, who was thought to no longer exist, to lead a mission out to find another planet for humanity to live on. He's the only guy because astronauts aren't even trained anymore, and even though he crashed a ship he was piloting years ago, he's the only one who could have gotten it off the ground. He expresses his hesitancy to it, he doesn't want to leave his children, but then Michael Caine says the food crisis is worse than it is. Do you really believe it's only as bad as the government is saying? And if we don't find a planet, your kids might not have a future at all. While the situation is grand, saving the world, it's actually incredibly personal and Cooper is doing it for his kids. He doesn't want to leave them. And after last time with Squid Game 2's dad leaving his child, this is really refreshing. He really loves his children. So Cooper is in space with Anne Hathaway and some other people. Sorry, some other people. Really, I need to say, how long is this movie? 2.5 hours? There are so many moments in this movie. Him leaving his daughter, the crew leaving Earth. There are so many more too. Not to mention the score. It's slightly annoying there are only like 2 people making scores that you know, but Hans Zimmer did a fantastic job with this soundtrack for Interstellar. I say soundtrack, but people probably only remember one piece from this movie. Anyway, I'll get to that later. There is also a video recorder and a receiver the crew can use to send to NASA, and NASA can send to them. From the moment I first saw him, I thought TARS was one of the most coolest and unique sci-fi robots ever. This rectangle that spins around, the rectangle has appendages that come out of it, and of course, knowing Nolan, I knew this thing was real at least to some extent. I think what people remember most about this movie is the moment after the water planet, so let's get to that. The crew make a decision on which out of a few planets to go to because they have to make decisions on their time and resources. There are 4 planets or something, each has astronauts NASA sent before to analyze the planets, and they send signals out about their data. The crew thinks about distance, how long to get there, and how promising it is. Another factor is relative time too. See, on their way they see Gargantua, a ginormous black hole. You don't know it at the time, but that will come up later. Nolan is really good with that, I notice. Setup, you see something at the beginning and it'll have importance later. Planets have different time depending on how close they are to Gargantua. Throughout the movie they talk about solving the problem of gravity. I'm a big dum-dum, so I don't know what that means, but it's just some sci-fi mumbo-jumbo nonsense. With that they also take into account the data from the planets, and with the relative time, the data could be just new. Eventually Eventually, they decide on the water planet. You all know how it goes. The whole sequence is so good. They land and their astronaut is nowhere to be found. Because of the time difference, the guy died just minutes before they landed. But Anne Hathaway wants to collect their data and searches for it. Meanwhile, what they think are mountains in the distance are actually tidal waves. And just imagine that, a wave the size of a mountain in the distance. Nolan does scale and awe fantastically. They get the data but just barely make it out alive. Tars is goaded and saves the day, but the ship has water in its engines and it needs to be flushed out. The process will take an hour or something. You know the meme, 1 minute here is 7 years on Earth. I knew even if I wasn't reminded of all the nostalgia memes on the internet, I knew the scene where Matthew McConaughey cries in front of a monitor was coming up. What I did not remember at all was how absolutely disheveled and broken one of their crewmates was when they got back. He got out of cryo sleep and spent 23 years alone. And really props to the actor. You really feel it, you really get it. He acts so differently, he's been through stuff. He acts like he's seen a ghost. It's pretty noticeable when actors straight up play their characters change. So Cooper was pissed from the beginning they were stuck on the planet and waiting for the engines to dry up. The crewmate tells him he has some messages for him. Man, even though I knew it was coming, I still wasn't ready for it. 23 years has passed on Earth for this mission which he did not expect to take this long. He starts watching the messages, some from his son. He watches his son grow up to a grown man right before his eyes. He talks about a girl, then his wife, then his baby. He learns his dad passed away. His daughter refuses to send messages to him, all within the span of a few minutes. His son doesn't even know if his dad is still out there anymore. They don't get any replies. They start getting weary. They think he just abandoned them and left them to die on Earth. Eventually, his daughter sends a message, this time all grown up. She's bitter, she's upset. She didn't want her dad to go away from the start, and she's never gotten over that. She calls him a liar. Cooper can only sit and watch and bawl his eyes out. From there, the movie does something interesting and splits itself into two parts, with Cooper in space and Jessica Chastain on Earth. It happens more in the third act, so for now, Cooper and the crew are regrouping and deciding what to do next. Because of their blunder on the water planet, they can only go to one other planet and they need to make a decision. They decide on a planet, but there's a conflict of interest. Anne Hathaway is in love with the astronaut whose planet they're gonna go to. She says, yes, I love him, but my vote isn't for that. The data he's sending back is promising. This theme of love will come back later. They decide on that planet. It looks like a barren frozen wasteland with jagged mountainous terrain. They go to the astronaut's little cargo hauler container of a base. They get him out of cryo sleep. It's Matt Damon. He, just like the crewmate before, is absolutely devastated. He hasn't seen a human being in years and is so traumatized by it. You feel it so hard. They wake him from cryo sleep and he immediately starts hugging and crying. Well, later, Matt Damon takes Cooper to show around his planet. Anne looks at the data he's been collecting all these years. His own TARS robot is broken and the other crewmate works on that. Matt Damon goes on monologuing. I know what's coming up, but even without that, he's acting pretty sus. Although he has been isolated for so long, I guess we can give him some leeway. But again, we know what's coming up and the scene after this, so let's get on our way. Matt Damon leads Cooper farther and farther away from base. He throws away Cooper's comms and then cracks his helmet. Matt Damon monologues about how scary it is to die alone, but is too much of a coward to sit and watch Cooper suffocate to death. Anne slowly realizes all his data he was sending was fake and he was just sending out false data so that someone could come and get him. The isolation got him so hard. His TARS robot was set up to blow up and their crewmate blows up while tinkering with it. Eventually, Cooper gets back to his comm device and tells Anne that Matt Damon is betraying them. Anne is on the radio with him as he's losing oxygen. She sees Matt Damon fly away with a ship. She quickly gets on another ship with TARS to try and rescue Cooper. I know he makes it out of there, but it was still very tense seeing him almost choke to death. We watch Cooper slowly crawl around, and in the meanwhile, we know what he's really thinking about as he's dying. His kids. Anne Hathaway and TARS make it just in the nick of time. They continue to follow Matt Damon as he goes to their space shuttle. Now, earlier in the movie, when Cooper docked the ship into the bigger ship, it was a whole delicate process. It's a clipped scene on YouTube, you know. If you don't know how to do it, you can't do it. Now, does Matt Damon know? No. But is he stubborn? Yes. Cooper and Anne keep telling him to stop trying it, and Matt Damon's ship constantly gives errors that the docking process didn't work. Eventually, he gets tired of it and overrides and opens his shuttle anyway. It looks like it works. But now the seal isn't shut and he explodes into the vacuum of space. Oh well, we have more important problems now though. The space shuttle is now spinning out of control and even worse, it's heading for the planet. And Cooper has to somehow manage to dock while all this is going on. It's all tense. The music is so good. I like the use of technology and AI to help solve this problem. He begins spinning the ship exactly as much as the shuttle is and descending down with it. He tells TARS to do it and then he docks to the ship. And then using the ship's engine, he slowly recovers the shuttle from the planet's gravity. It's all so big, and with how Christopher Nolan movies are, kinda exhausting, but we're not off this roller coaster yet. Now we have a new problem. We're being sucked into Gargantua's gravity. Again, the scale and size and awe of everything is just turned up to 11. For a man who doesn't like to use CGI, he sure is pretty good at it when he does use it. Not to take away from the effects artists who made it happen. I heard from a Corridor Crew video that they plugged in the math of a black hole into their software and that's what came out, whatever that means. They're in Gargantua's pull and have to come up with a way out of it quickly. They get rid of their excess weight. Tars self-sacrifices. He doesn't feel anything about it since he's a robot. It's the only logical option. I don't know what it is with me and fictional characters, but be it Anthony in the first Ant-Man movie, or Blue in Jurassic World, or Tars here, they all made me cry, man. They come up with a way to get out of Gargantua's gravity and head to another planet. However, Cooper ends up lying to Anne. She thought they would go together, but Tars and the ship he was in wasn't enough. They need to get rid of more weight. So Cooper ejects his ship and the shuttle finally makes it out of the black hole's pool, and Cooper slowly gets sucked into it. We don't have any clue what goes on in a black hole. It's a complete mystery. We have close-ups of Cooper enveloped in darkness as his ship slowly gets torn apart. Eventually, darkness. And when Cooper opens his eyes again, a weird mega structure all around him. It's like, instead of a place frozen in time, it's all of time of just one place. His daughter's room. He sees his past. He sees him and his daughter have their fights, him hugging her goodbye, and Cooper crying to himself, "Don't let me go." He's not all alone though. We don't see him, but Tars can still radio Cooper's comms. They believe there's a reason he's there in this tesseract, as they call it. Cooper has a slight effect on the outside world. We see him knock over books when he slams the bookcase. Cooper then comes up with an idea, giving Murph a message only she would understand. He tells Tars to convert the data of the black hole, gravity, into binary and feed it to him. And then he uses what little effect he has on the environment to put that into the watch on the shelf. Meanwhile, on Earth, Murph is going stir crazy. The world has gotten even worse. Crops are dying more and more. She's been with Michael Caine mostly and finds out that there is no solution to gravity. They can't solve it, and he hasn't been able to for years. He's been lying to her. She goes back home looking for answers. At this point, she's almost become estranged from her brother. She's become a scientist, still thinking there's hope somehow and that her dad is actually out there on a mission to save the planet. Her brother has been looking after the farm and has a wife and a child to take care of and had gotten over their dad. The famine and dust storms are even more and more rampant and disastrous, but even despite that, she causes a distraction by setting a part of their farm on fire and going in the house while her brother goes to deal with it. A last-ditch effort. She looks around her room, analyzes and thinks about all the things that have happened in her room there growing up. The ghost, as she puts it. Her dad was her ghost. She figures out there's a pattern in the dust and realizes it's binary and starts jotting it down. Murph goes back to NASA and starts working on the binary data that her dad gave her. Once this happens, the Tesseract begins closing. Him and Tars figure that they fulfilled whatever purpose the beings that wanted them there wanted them for, and they say their last goodbyes, and Cooper closes his eyes and enters that long sleep. When Cooper opens his eyes again, he's in a hospital. We see a documentary style footage everywhere, and we learn that the message he sent back in time worked. He, his daughter, they saved the world, and they're leaving on some ring planet. They rescued Cooper pretty recently. He's fresh out of a black hole. His daughter is now very old and is being brought there. He finally gets to see her again, all aged and frail, and man, it gets me choked up too. She says, "Somehow I always knew it was you there with me, deep down. You never left me." They hold hands, they cry, it's all very sweet. It turns out Tars somehow made it out of the black hole too. Cooper fixes him up. Throughout the movie, there were reoccurring jokes of his sarcasm percentage. They have another laugh together. And now Cooper and Tars set up on a new ship together, just like Anakin and R2-D2, and set out to continue to search for a new planet. And we cut to another planet, Anne Hathaway, without her helmet on. This planet looks promising, and she set up a whole base and everything, and we finish with a hopeful feeling for the future. This movie, as I said before, for how grand of a scale and scope it has, is actually really personal and has more smaller themes than saving the planet. You might think the movie is about solving the problem of gravity or whatever sci-fi mumbo jumbo, but in the end, the movie is actually just about love and how it transcends time and space, that sort of hippie mumbo jumbo. It's love. It makes you emotional. Originally, because of how I just am, I was planning on covering nearly all of Nolan's filmography, except for Oppenheimer, because I can't go through that again. But then I watched Interstellar again and realized I had way more than enough to talk about. Among the movies of his that I have watched, I definitely do think there's an improvement, even if something like The Dark Knight is doing something completely different than, say, Tenet. I do think he's just gotten better and better at his work, although the better you get, the harder it is to improve. I know I didn't talk about literally everything in the movie, but I think that's enough. So for what it's worth, I think this movie is a solid 9 out of 10. Acting, effects, writing, pacing, all on point, man. And it hits me emotionally too. It has the sauce. So there's a tier list, there's a letterboxd. Like and subscribe if you want to. Check me out on Twitter, and thank you guys for watching. It means a lot. Goodbye, everyone.